Greg Height here with the Georgia Lacrosse Officials Association Instagram series called the Pregame. I'm sitting at home and doing some errands around the house, taking the day off, recharging the batteries. Decided to listen to the Tailgate podcast with Terry Foy and Nick Ocello. I highly recommend this podcast. These guys do a great job of breaking down last week's D1 games, upcoming D1 games. They get into the backside of this. They really do a really interesting analysis of the coaching decisions, the statistics of it all. They know their stuff. Highly recommend. Lets me sort of pick and choose what games I want to watch that I've recorded, that I've streamed. I think, it's important to watch games and watch game film, and that's going to get you better. That's a separate topic. What I started to think about today as they were describing the end of the Cornell Notre Dame game from this past week, which, if you have not watched this game, this is a really fun lacrosse game to watch. The level of play is spectacular. Just a great game, right? Crazy ending, great game. Their description is spectacular. Shout out to those two guys. They really break a lot of really interesting stuff down. The off-the-field stuff, the on-the-field stuff. Again, I think they do a wonderful job. And it got me thinking, if you're an official, look, the game you want to do is the one where it means something and it comes down to an important thing in the last couple of minutes of the game, right? This is the officials' version of, ninth inning, 2 outs, 2 strikes, Yankee Stadium, World Series on the line moment, right? The final drive in football, this is the moment that you want to have the opportunity to say, I'm here and I can do this. My goal is to get this right and communicate it as effectively as possible, right? That's it. But what I want to remind everybody of is, to be in that moment, you got to live or die by the calls that you make. And I want you to think about all the stuff that we talk about in pregame and in training. We want to be consistent as a crew. We want to decide whether or not something is advantage, disadvantage, because we can figure out what the penalty is later. Or is this a personal foul? Is this a safety issue? Is this a conduct issue that I need to address? And then finally, we need to call the obvious stuff. Shout out to John Bastowski. I stole his safety, advantage, disadvantage, obvious mantra for sort of cataloging lacrosse fouls years ago. I think it's a great way to explain to newer officials what that's like. The next evolution of that process, however, is starting to understand what your level of play is. Right? If you're used to doing U13 games or U14 games or JV games or high school games or playoff games, there's always an adjustment, right? We talk about the level of play, the skill level, the importance of the game. Is it a rivalry game? Is it these are a lot of the factors that go into how we're going to call a lacrosse game. And at the higher levels, you allow more physical play. So in my pregame, I stole this from Trey Towery, who told me early on, you have to have clear advantage and disadvantage. Clear advantage and disadvantage, right? If you are unsure that he was disadvantaged, it's likely a no call. And you have to consistently be seeing what your partners are calling in order to sort of adjust your bar to their bar, right? That's what we mean by being consistent as a crew throughout the game. And then, what are we going to call the personal stuff? Big guys and physical play with high skill level, that requires a different level, a different bar. And, it takes a while to get there as an official. I remember coming up, and I was doing a college game, and at the end of the game, the observer said that was a high school call, right? Was I technically right by rule? Yeah. Was that the call that I should have made? Now, I am not going to debate whether I should have made that call or shouldn't have made that call. I made that call. I got to live or die with that decision. But it got me thinking about that conversation of, what are we going to call today? How are we going to be consistent with everybody else? How are we going to make sure that we we get this right. Because at the end of the game, with 47 seconds left, which another game I'm supposed to watch apparently is the Siena Manhattan game, where one of those teams comes back from 4 goals down in 47 seconds, right? Are you ready for that? Because that's ninth inning, 2 outs, 2 strikes, game on the line. This is what we're talking about here, okay? That series of plays where insane stuff happens at a really high speed, and you have to be processing all this information. Like, literally, this is why I love doing what I do, right? You get those games where you get a close one, and it's really fun because you know you are going to be put to the test. Like, this is why you are here. And so you have to be willing to have these conversations. No one is trying to big game you. Nobody is trying to say, like, oh, young buck, you don't know the rule. We're trying to get you into that conversation so that you can advance to the highest level that you can advance to, right? The only goal that anybody has, if they are an official and they are trying to mentor you, is they want you to be the best official that you can be, right? A lot of us really take seriously that train your replacement philosophy. So, I took that with a grain of salt, but I started to have that conversation a lot more. And I think that's something I want people to be open to, right? You have to be willing to defend yourself by rule. Like, what does it say in the rule book? Not what you think it says, not what you heard your coach say, or Greg Height in his video said, right? What does the rule book say? And then how do you interpret that to what you're calling? Secondly, what's the level? What's the temperature? You have to get better at describing what your partners were calling and how you were processing that information, right? And then you've got to, make sure that you go back and you watch the film, right? That's really important. You got to go back and watch the film of what you actually did and be open to criticism, right? And then somehow try to figure out a way to not do that the next time around. Like, that's what the job is. So think about those moments. You're the official on the call in the moment. What are you going to do? You want to be there. Be prepared. And this is how you get prepared to be there, because those games are really fun to do. But everybody's going to break down that play a million ways from Sunday, because that's going to be the reason that one team won and one team lost. And that's the hard part, right? It's not people yelling at you and blaming you. It's you having to have the conversation with yourself of, did I get that right? Right? Because we are the guys that keep trying to go out the next night and do it again, right? So just thought I would share those musings with you. If you have any questions or ideas for what we should talk about, or if you want to jump on here and say something, you can reach me. You can just Google me. You'll find me.